So overall, the nonprofit sector employs 2.5 million Canadians. That is 14% of the workforce. And what a lot of people don't realize is that's more than construction, manufacturing, or retail, which are the three largest for-profit industries. What we also saw, and again, not a surprise to any of your listeners, nonprofit salaries on average are 13% lower than the national average. And if you just look at those community-focused nonprofits, they trail by 31%. So overall, what we were seeing both internally and across the sector is that there was this challenge of scarce funding, which leads to low pay, which means recruiting staff is really challenging. Retaining them gets really hard. Talented people are leaving, and overall, that has a great impact on our sector. So what we decided to do in our a unique position where we think about the sector and we try and find solutions, we wanted to put ourselves as a pilot in this model. So we started piloting a 4-day work week in January 2023.
Hi, friends. Ever wondered how you could turn your big ideas into results? Together, let's reimagine a better sector, tackle systemic issues, and yes, raise some serious cash. Welcome back to the Small Nonprofit, the podcast where your passion meets action. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. Or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Maria, and I'm a fundraising expert with over a decade of experience raising funds. And my mission is to make sure EDs like you can do so without the stress. To do that, I am bringing in Jodine. Today, we're going to be talking about a 4-day work week. So how can we ensure that you're not burning out, that you're not burning your team out, and everybody is getting along? So hi, Jodine.
Hi, Maria.
For people who don't know you just yet, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Jodine Baker. I work at Imagine Canada. I am the Vice President of Research, Advocacy, and External Relations, and I am based out of Winnipeg.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you were in Winnipeg.
I am.
Yeah, cool. So what is Imagine Canada? Because we do have some American listeners.
Yeah, so Imagine Canada, we are a national bilingual charity, and we really, our role is to support the nonprofit sector. We want to make sure that every organization and charity in Canada is working at their full strength. We want to make sure that they're enabled to better serve and engage the individuals and communities that they serve here in Canada as well as globally. And we do this in a few ways. We develop and deliver products and services that help charities and nonprofits. I know you think a lot about fundraising. We have a couple of products like Grant Connect that help support organizations. We also, and this is the area that I love, we create and mobilize data, information, research, and knowledge that help charities and nonprofits with their decision making. And then finally, we advocate for charities. So we do some policy and advocacy work with the federal government to make sure that government understands the value of the sector and that we are, again, enabled in our operating environment to perform at the highest level.
So Imagine Canada has done a lot of really cool policy things at the federal government level. That I feel like that could be like its own episode. But today I want to talk about something that you've done internally and those learnings that you've shared with the broader sector here, because I feel like a 4-day work week was like a hot topic right before the pandemic. And then other things happened, right? So I'd love to hear, how did Imagine Canada adopt a 4-day work week? Was that easy? Was that hard? What does that look like there?
Yeah, so maybe let's start with how we even came to the decision to test this or to even entertain it. Like all nonprofits, which we are a charity ourselves, we know that it's a really challenging environment to work in. We think a lot about our staff. How do we support them? Staff well-being. Two main things really came to mind for us. So one, you mentioned this, staff well-being burnout. So in the nonprofit sector, staff are carrying heavily emotional burdens. We're always wondering, where are the funds going to come from? How am I going to make payroll? Am I hiring contract workers? There's also the mission-driven stress. So a lot of nonprofits are dealing with really heavy issues like homelessness, mental health struggles, and that can lead to like really challenging work-life balance. As you mentioned, during COVID, that stress just intensified. So we saw the same thing internally. As it already is like a heavy work environment. COVID happened. The workload amped up, the demand increased, but there weren't funds there to hire more staff. I just want to share a few stats we look at too. We're a really big data-driven organization, and we recently published a report. It's called People First, and it really paints a picture of some of the unique challenges that face nonprofit staff. So overall, the nonprofit sector employs 2.5 million Canadians. That is 14% of the workforce, and what a lot of people don't realize is that's more than construction, manufacturing, or retail, which are the three largest for-profit industries. What we also saw, And again, not a surprise to any of your listeners, nonprofit salaries on average are 13% lower than the national average. And if you just look at those community focused nonprofits, they trail by 31%. So overall, what we were seeing both internally and across the sector is that there was this challenge of scarce funding, which leads to low pay, which means recruiting staff is really challenging. Retaining them gets really hard. Talented people are leaving, and overall, that has a great impact on our sector. So, what we decided to do in our a unique position where we think about the sector and try and find solutions, we wanted to put ourselves as a pilot in this model. So we started piloting a 4-day work week in January 2023. And it's exactly what it sounds like. A 4-day work week is we are working Monday through Thursday and our office closes on Friday. Our commitment is a 4-day work week with no decrease to pay for all staff. So what that means is we did not move to a compressed work week where staff are working more hours through Monday to Thursday. We also did not reduce it to getting paid for 4 days of the week. And overall, the reason for doing this is really believing that there's this link to well-being and the amount of time you work. So an attempt to really equalize that work-life balance and hope that it would lead to an improvement in retention and staff well-being overall. So that's where we're coming from in our thinking about why did we even want to try this.
I love that you like preemptively address some of the questions that our EDs listening definitely have. Are people working 10 to 12-hour days instead? Are you paying them 80% of a full-time salary because they're doing 80% of the work or whatever it's going to be? So I love that. Um, so how did you actually roll out the pilot?
Yeah. So there's a program that exists globally. It's called the 4-day week global pilot, and we joined that. And so it's a program that essentially walks you through all of the questions and issues and challenges as an organization that you would need to think about in moving to a 4-day work week. So it's definitely not something that we just dove into and talked about for a month and then said, okay, everyone, like we're going to start working 4 days. We prepared for it. So before we moved to it, there's a bit of an on ramp. So we started by looking at meetings. Meetings for our organization was a big one. People looking at how much time are you actually in meetings? Which of these meetings are essential? Like, where can they be shortened? Could this meeting have been an email? We also introduced organization wide some meeting free slots. So we blocked off Monday afternoons as meeting free internal, like priority for internal. We understand sometimes with an external stakeholder, you need to take it, but in terms of booking with other staff, not on Monday afternoon and not on Friday. So initially, before we moved, we blocked off an entire Friday. And that was really key because we really got people used to already, especially on that Friday, just not having meetings booked in. So no one had their regular one-on-ones or their team department meetings on that Friday. And finally, we engaged staff in the planning. So we did create a 4-day work week group, and it includes staff from all levels of the organization. So this was not a top-down process. This was very collaborative to really start thinking about the goals, getting clear on why are we doing this as an organization, starting to anticipate some of the challenges that might come up. You know, talking to other staff, what are you nervous about? And then also to get together to talk about the metrics. So to talk about what does success look like? How will we know that we're actually achieving what those goals are, what we're saying we're going to achieve? And so that's really how we started it, was really with this on-ramp and a lot of planning.
So first I want to dive into the results and then I want to talk about like how specific organizations can actually do this. So what were the results? How long did it take to measure them? What were you measuring and were you successful?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I will say where we are right now is we still consider ourselves in a pilot. What we've done is we do just keep extending it. So we started in January 2023, extended it through 2024. We are now in a period where we have committed to extend it through 2026. So we do still consider ourselves in this pilot phase. We are tracking close to 50 metrics. So this is across areas. We have a lot of buckets of things that include well-being, so staff well-being. We are looking at productivity. We're looking at outputs. We're looking at sick day use. So I'll highlight a few of the key ones. I'm not going to list off all 50 metrics, but a few of the key ones. So morale and well-being. So we do employee pulse surveys, which is very common. What we saw is a 46% increase in staff morale and well-being. And this was compared to 2022. We did take a baseline measure. And this was across mental, emotional, and physical health. We saw work-life satisfaction go up 112%. And just what that looked like was in 2022, The question was, I'm happy with my work life balance. And in 2022, 43% of our staff were expressing agreement with that. It went up to 91% in 2024. We also tracked sick days. Sick days dropped by 42%. And then the productivity. So we also wanted to make sure we weren't losing impact. We were reducing the days of the week that we work, but we want to still have that impact. And what we saw was a mixed bag. So some areas in productivity went up, some went down. We don't see this as a negative thing to have some productivity go down because one of the goals was to bring workload and productivity to a sustainable level. We did have an increase in the number of our research publications. Our policy output actually increased. In terms of some of our external engagement, our membership went up 60%. We held steady in terms of the number of accredited organizations. And again, as I mentioned, there were some areas where our output dropped, but we did not necessarily see that as a negative thing. And then the last metric is we always ask staff if they feel confident in their ability to meet their goals. So just in our planning process, staff set their own goals. And the staff confidence in meeting their objectives increased by 19%. And so that was encouraging for us to see as well.
So I had this conversation with one of your staff people. That's why I was so excited to bring you on because he was telling me like we actually haven't lost a staff person since we implemented this, except one who got a much higher raise.
Yeah.
So that in itself is huge because we have such a big retention crisis. Is that still the case?
I think we have gone beyond just the one since 2022, but an undeniable benefit and advantage has been retaining talent. So it's absolutely nowhere near what it was prior to implementing this in terms of the turnover and also in terms of retaining talent. So in our interview process now, we do ask candidates around like, how much did this appeal to you or did you notice it? And we see so many candidates mentioning the 4-day work week as a major benefit.
So attracting and retaining. Nice. Okay. So in 2022, I was an in-house director of development and communications at a medium-sized nonprofit that does frontline work. So they do a food bank, drop-in meals, that kind of stuff. And I was so excited to pump out this 4-day work week idea and roll it out because people are exhausted. The need has increased. There's so much pressure. People are just not feeling well. And we had an astronomical drop in staff. Like attrition was like 150%, maybe 200% for the whole organization, like something ridiculously huge. So I thought maybe this would be something really helpful just based on all the stats that you're saying. It seems like it would have been the right path. But there was some pushback because people were saying, well, how can we actually do this? And what I was saying was maybe you could do it so half the staff work Monday to Thursday and the other half Tuesday to Friday. So I'm not sure. Have you dealt with frontline organizations asking you how they can do this and what would you advise them?
Yeah, and so that I will say from the front, we do recognize the privilege that we have in being an organization that does not deal with frontline. So many organizations could not do a 4-day work week model the way that we're doing it because of just the way that their program and service delivery is structured. Also, limited resources, funding, like some just can't do it. But for those organizations, I would encourage them to think about their goals, which are probably the same as ours in implementing this around that staff well-being, retention, finding the balance. And there's a lot of other decent work practices out there to explore. As you said, sometimes it's about just the way 4 days might look, could be on a different schedule, it could be shifting, it could be around maybe it's Friday afternoons in the summer that get close. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the all-in 4-day work week, but it's really just encouraging EDs to think about those buckets of metrics, like where do you want to see the change and what are some practices you can implement where you might expect and anticipate to see that improvement?
You mentioned dignified work practice. What is that? Can you give us another example?
Yeah, so decent work practices really talk about putting the person first. So putting your staff first and thinking about that holistic approach. So you're not just thinking about pay, but you're thinking about the life balance. You're thinking about practices as an employer that you can implement that would really contribute to your staff, again, across all of those metrics showing improvement. So, yes, work output and productivity and feeling as though they can perform the skills, giving them PD training, but also that emotional well being, the physical well being. So, speaking again around a lot of this falls under HR policies. So, what are your sick day policies look like? Do you have personal days that people can take? But really, at the heart of it is putting the staff first.
I want to ask you something, but I'm hoping to hear about, were there any legal considerations you had to think about? Because if you reduce the number of hours, if you don't reduce the number of pay, I'm guessing it's not considered constructive dismissal. But were there other things that you had to think through before actually rolling it out?
Yeah, I can't speak very well to the legal side. I don't know that I mean, we certainly haven't had any legal concerns with it. All of our staff are considered full-time. All of their benefits and their pay is done on a full-time basis. I think the point you're bringing up is one thing I wanted to highlight. It's open communication, not just with staff, but with your board, with funders, with any stakeholder to learn in advance what concerns might they have. We had board and stakeholders and even one funder express some concern and hesitancy around the impact, the bottom line to the organizations. I'm sure the board asked questions around legal issues. I wasn't at Imagine at the time, but I'm sure they did. My answer to that would be if that question's in your mind, if you're wondering, are there legal challenges, like better to address them in advance before you jump into any sort of pilot.
And then why do you still call it a pilot versus going full in?
I think it's that we know the importance of collecting data over time. And so, yes, you could say, oh, well, it's been 2 full years. We also understand we may find ourselves in a position one day, whether it's due to funding, due to political factors, or other external pressures, that we may want to consider maybe not returning to a full 5-day work week, but needing to explore a variation. As you said, sometimes an organization says, I can't do this. I can't do a 4-day work week where it's 28 hours a week, yet we're still producing at the same level we were before. We are still leaving it open for us to continue to collect data and really understand the effect that the 4-day work week is having on ourselves and our stakeholders.
I guess it also makes sense because like people's well-being wouldn't change overnight.
Yeah, I would agree.
So for executive directors who are thinking like, oh, I would love to try this, what would be your recommendation for first steps?
So look into that global program that I mentioned, the 4-day workweek global pilot, and get some information there. And then, as I said, the other part is starting small. It's the meeting assessment for us was a huge one. Maybe look at, can we reduce the number of meetings? A lot of organizations are already dipping their toes in when you think about organizations that have summers where they give Fridays off or Friday afternoon off, or even in the summer shutting down at 3 p.m. Those are all things that are you're in the headspace already. So I would say start by gathering more information and then getting clear on the goals. Like, why do we want to do this? What is the problem that we're seeing? What do we think the 4-day work week could solve? And then the metrics. And I'm a data person at heart, but really getting clear on where do you want to see change and where don't you want to see change within some of your metrics and your outputs.
Are there any other like last words you want to leave our audience with today?
I think just to say that it's been a really great experience for us and positive, but I don't want to paint that picture of like, and it's perfect because it's not. There are challenges. Do some staff sometimes work on Fridays? Yes. Just like in any organization, there are times where things comes up and you have to work off hours. We do our best not to, but sometimes it happens. It can be transformative for both employees and organizations, but there are risks. So again, you need to be open and communication. And then I think just my final point is going back to that point that we know that nonprofits, which are the country's largest employer, have this pay gap that we're dealing with. There isn't going to be an influx of funds anytime soon to allow us to close that pay gap. So that does mean burnout, turnover, inequities. They're here. They're something we're trying to work to solve. And the 4-day work week is a tactic, one tactic, not the tactic, to help tackle well-being and equity challenges without needing to increase wages. So just encourage people to look into it, and hopefully some of you listening might work for you. It might be a solution that can help increase your employee well-being and your retention.
And if you're listening and you have tried this out, we would love to hear from you. Please reach out to myself or Jodine. We would love to hear how your experience has been, the type of organization that you're working at. With that being said, Jodine, if people want to continue the conversation with you or Imagine Canada, where can they connect with you?
They can connect with me. They can email me at jbaker@imaginecanada.ca or go to our website, which is imaginecanada.ca.
Thank you so much for being here today to share your expertise. It sounds like all those stats, they sound amazing. And I'm actually currently trying out a 4-day work week with my staff. So I want to see how that continues. This has just been really helpful to illustrate the benefits of it. So thank you, Jodine.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's been a pleasure being here with you.
And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. As always, if you want to see our lovely faces, you can do that on YouTube. I hope that you give this a try. And if you do, I would love to hear what metrics you're tracking. If you've already given it a try, I would love to hear, have you seen similar results to Imagine Canada? But that's it for today. Thank you. Until next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well-being. Bye for now.